Hello and welcome to the Bacon Theatre for our Headmaster Assembly this week. And there are going to be four main things that we're going to be looking at today. So firstly, I'm going to give some feedback on our response to the government's new guidelines on schools in the second half of this term. I'm going to be covering a little bit more on the internal assessments that are due to take place after half term, to celebrate some academic achievements that are taking place in your lessons and in your independent work. Mr. Hall will be giving a little bit more feedback on the co-curricular things that have been taking place, and there's some great stuff to hear about there, so please make sure that you stay tuned in for that. The first thing to say is this, that the government's guidelines are really clear that what is required for secondary schools is very different to that of primary schools. But for year 10 and 12, we have been asked to make sure that we are supporting remote learning with face-to-face contact. And we're very fortunate as a school and as a community that we have the resources to be able to maintain face-to-face contact in so many areas of our school life, albeit through a screen. So lessons, tutorials, learning support sessions, EAL lessons, Oxbridge tutorials, UCAS conversations, even house assemblies. Most of these are taking place in some form or other with that face-to-face contact. So the pressure on us is quite a significantly different one to that facing a number of schools in the UK. The second thing that I am very aware of is that some of you are absolutely thriving in this remote learning world, that you're loving being at home, you're loving the freedom that you have to be able to choose your timetables a little bit more, and actually the method of working is working really well for you. For others of you, this is really quite a tough time, and learning in this way is not really working for you at all, and maybe motivation is hard to come by. So the great thing about this situation is that in the second half of term, at some point, we will be able to offer one-to-one tutorials and maybe small group tutorials for pupils to be able to come into school in years 10 and year 12, if that would be of benefit and of use to you. But we're also hoping to be able to extend that a little bit more in our remote learning as well, so that if you aren't able to come into school, maybe because you live overseas or because your circumstances just don't make it possible, we want to try and create more opportunities for you to have that one-to-one and small group time, because sometimes if you're in a large class setting, that can be more difficult. So our aim is to offer a little bit more tutorial support in the second half of term to our pupils, whether that be on the Dean Close site here, or whether that is through Teams or Zoom, or whatever method we are using. So I suppose the key bit is this. In reality, there's going to be very little change for us in the second half of term. Now, government guidelines do change, and we'll be keeping an eye on them, but that is where we are at this particular time. It is great, therefore, to be able to see the number of people who are really succeeding and achieving well, and Green Chits is just one measure of that. So congratulations to the houses who are at the top of the tree this particular week, and they are Hadley in third place, Fawley in second, and Meads just pipping Fawley at the top of that particular table. It has also been wonderful to see the individuals who are achieving highly, and again, not often covered in those houses. And I just want to pick out one person in particular, and it's just a warm welcome to Jason Yao. Jason's doing incredibly well in the Green Chits for Tower House, and yet he's never physically been in a lesson at Dean Close. So it's a warm welcome to Jason, who's joined us this term, and we very much look forward to meeting you properly in September, Jason. It is always really good to hear about particular pieces of work that have been singled out by a teacher for a commendation. Piece of work that maybe go that little bit further and that little bit deeper. So this week for commendations, Daphne Bennett, Nick Schuback and Mimi Payton have all been chosen by Mrs. Briggs to receive a commendation. Daphne for her work on the M&S food campaign in 2014, Nick Schuback for his work on the Red Cross wall propaganda campaign, and for Mimi Payton looking at the branding that went into the Patek Philippe watch campaign. In philosophy and ethics, Alice Daisy produced an absolutely stunning essay on the US response to the pandemic. This was based on the discussions led by a current philosopher, Michael Sandel. Jemima Hollands, Leah Barton and Guy Green produced some great work in Spanish using their full range of GCSE vocab and beyond on a piece of work looking at lockdown. And on a similar theme but in a different subject, Valentina Alfonsi produced a humorous, emotive and thought-provoking piece of writing, again inspired by our current lockdown. Evie Sharp is to be commended for her entry to the Lancaster University Modern Languages Prize. A number of our pupils in our lower sixth submitted entries for this prize and were really well received by the university. But Evie's work was picked out particularly as she wrote in French on the learning languages to build bridges theme. And she was praised for her linguistic and her analytical skills at this stage by the professors marking that work. So congratulations to all of you in that area. Moving on now to the topic of the internal assessments that are due to take place in the second week after half term. And there are a few key things that I would like you to take away. The first thing is, what is the aim? What are we hoping to achieve by doing these assessments? Because it's quite clear that they can't be done in the same way as a normal exam season would be done at the end of a school year. So there are assessments because we're looking for a couple of things. We want to be able to assess and identify where the gaps in the learning might be. So where might your gaps be from the first two terms or from this term? And that will enable us to really focus our teaching in the second half of this term, but also in the next academic year to make sure we know where we need to be spending our time and focusing our energies. The second bit is that within learning, it's really important that you add things and you build things in stages. So consolidating your learning, taking the time to get some of that knowledge into your head now is going to be really useful, particularly for those of you who are taking public exams in a year's time. So the first week after half term will be a week of teacher-supported revision. So this is, again, is a bit of a change. These normally take place immediately after half term, so the half term break would be normally used pretty full on for revision. So you will need to do some revision over half term, but you will also have that extra week where your teachers will be available and will be leading you through that and targeting and focusing you into the right areas. In terms of the assessments themselves, obviously they will take place at home. The teachers will be there at the beginning of the tests and at the end of the test. They will start and they will finish. They will give you your normal timings that you would expect if you were sitting an assessment or a test in class. But they will also be available to help you if you struggle at any point during that particular test. We will provide the normal extra time arrangements. The EAL department and the Learning Support department will be available to provide support. And we're going to be using various ways to make sure you have everything you need to take those assessments. It's not so much about a judgment this year. We're not looking to make full assessments on UCAS grades in this way, or maybe about your setting for next year. So please don't worry about these particular assessments. Our aim really is to try to understand where you are, and more importantly, what are the things that we need to focus on and where we need to fill in things in the course of the second year. Now, just a few people sent me photographs this week of their hobbies and the activities that they've been involved with. So just a big thank you to the Mason family. Great to see your family workouts. To Evie Sharp, who's produced a stunning piece of art using wool gathered from the Falkland Islands. And to Sydney Davis for an incredibly impressive bit of crocheting. The detail and the skill and everything else that's going into these artistic pieces of work at the moment, absolutely loving seeing that. So thank you so much for sending those through. I've got to be honest, I would have liked a few more, and I'm really hoping that this week's challenge will enable more of you to get involved in this, and I would love to create a montage of everybody's photographs next week. So you will have heard the new government guidelines for you living in the UK that we are required to cover our faces during lockdown when we visit a shop. This is to protect other people and other shoppers that we may come into contact with. And you've been really encouraged to make your own so that we can protect the stocks that are there. And I'd love to see you this week. So here is a photograph of me with my personalised face covering. We have a particular thing in our family about camper vans, and I have a particular attachment to our former camper van called Biggles. Biggles is a blue Type 2 camper, much like the one that you can see on my face covering. And I'd love to encourage you to develop your own face coverings, make those this week. A little bit of flair, a little bit of personality in those as well, and then send me a photograph of those for next week. For me to be able to create a single image of lots of people with their face masks on would be great. If we could get to 30 or 40, I think that would be a wonderful thing. So that probably means that I'm going to need one from you. There is an important reminder in all of this, of course, which is that we have a responsibility as Decanians to do all we can to make sure that this thing goes away. There are many people in our society and our communities who are far more vulnerable than we are, and we have a duty and a responsibility to care for them. And the best way we can do that is by following the guidelines that we've been given about social distancing, about when we exercise, about where we exercise, and about the choices that we make in terms of our interactions. Please can I encourage you all to continue to stick into this process, and let's see this thing through so that we can get back to normal. There are people's lives and livelihoods who are depending on everybody to play their part. And I hope that we as a school will all play our part in our different ways. On that, I'm very, very grateful to Mr. and Mrs. Mears for the work that they are doing to provide us with some things to think about during this particular pandemic. And they're using a model called the 5 gears, and it's based on this idea that we need to go through various gears in life in order to flourish. And the gear that they have sent a little podcast about, a little video that you'll see in the weekly mailing this week, is rest. And they're encouraging us to do something which changes our gears and which enables us to take some deliberate rest. And there is some real sense behind this, and I hope that you'll take the time to listen to their thoughts and ideas later on over the weekend. They suggest maybe reading a chapter of a book, listening to a podcast, playing chess, sitting outside with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and maybe having a bath with some candles, maybe some bubbles, a bit of Michael Bublé. You could call that a Bublé bath. But really take some time this weekend to deliberately rest. It could be a great thing for you. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Hall, but in between Mr. Hall and I, you will hear a snippet from this week's lunchtime concert. And it was a great thing to be able to sit down and to take some time out and to listen to the music this week. So thank you to Rachel and to Finn. And here they are.
Hello and welcome to all of you once again from Cheltenham. I thought I would be brave and venture outside this week, so here I am in the quad in front of the pond. I'm absolutely delighted with the number of you that have engaged once again with our online activities, and if you haven't ventured onto the DCS at Home webpage, then I would urge you to do so. Thank you to all of those who have submitted entries this week to our competitions, and it's been a real treat looking through all of the entries. But before taking a look at these, I wanted just to highlight some of the other things that have been going on. Livy Mason in the 4th form in Shelburne was involved in a project called Project Sunrise, which was a complex musical performance by the National School Symphony Orchestra. The end product was fantastic, and I do hope that Livy will share that particular recording with her friends. It was a great success, and well done, Livy. Jed, Sam and Ollie have been collaborating online, putting their IT skills to good use, producing an online medieval game, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of their labour and how that game progresses in due course. And at the end of last week, our Brookcourt Current Affairs group met with Cheltenham MP Alex Chalk for a conversation about his national responsibility, GCSEs, the economy and restarting that, and of course the NHS. And that provided a fantastic opportunity for our pupils to engage in conversation and to ask questions with Alex. Moving on to this week's competition winners, many congratulations to Fenella Troughton for her submission, which was selected as this week's winner of the Photography Shadow competition, which I have named the Mysterious Marbles. Commendations in this week's photography competition go to Evie Sharp and Barnaby Huxtable for their submissions. It was great to see a submission for the Recreate a Masterpiece competition from Mirabel Troughton with her recreation of Ophelia by William Waterhouse. I'm sure you will agree with me that she has done an absolutely stunning job with that. Well done, Mirabel. In this week's memorable scene from history, Lego Challenge, first place goes to Tom Richardson for his depiction of the Jeremy Thorpe scandal in the 1970s, which has subsequently been made into the TV drama series A Very English Scandal, featuring Hugh Grant and Ben Whishaw. I have to admit needing to do some research on this one. Not being British, it was one that hadn't crossed my radar.
Philistine, I hear my colleagues mumbling to themselves. But second place goes to Joel Kenshall with his interpretation of archaeological work at the Great Pyramids at Giza in Egypt in the early 20th century. Very well done to both Tom Richardson and Joel Kenshall for their submissions. I will have to place an order for one of these sausage rolls produced by Barnaby Huxtable in this week's Bake Off. Well done on winning this week's competition. Mrs. Larkin Lawton also wants to mention Charlie Harris's contribution as a first-time entrant this week. It was the first time she'd seen Charlie cook and was very impressed. While on the subject of cooking, Mrs. Barrett recently shared Bethany Klink's online work with Leiths to make sure they were happy with what we were doing during lockdown. They replied saying they were so impressed and asked if they could please share the work with other schools and as an example for them to see. Well done, Beth, and all the other Leiths candidates who are working so hard to keep on track. Giving you an update on the Strava running stats. Week 3, pupils getting closer, but still no victory for the pupils. The staff win by 143.7 kilometres in week 3. So they are catching, but the progress is slow. But very well done to Jack Stokes on the longest run of the week of 15 kilometres. Great progress there from all our pupil athletes. Also, I thought I'd share this little DCS run that was given a little bit of kudos during the course of the weekend. So great to see Strava being used so well by all our athletes. Also a Strava cycling update, just to keep the pupils in the hunt. They won by a massive 884 kilometres this week. The staff only managed to rack up 688 kilometres between them, but the pupils a massive 1,572 kilometres. Very, very well done on a win on the cycle challenge this week to the pupils. Well done to Will Kennedy for recording the greatest distance and Matt Beecham for recording an average of 37.6 kilometres per hour over 26 kilometres, which is pretty quick. Well done, Matt and Will. Moving on to the virtual sports day. Well done to all the Dean Close pupils who completed the challenges and competed in the virtual sports day on Thursday, the 7th of May. It was great to see pupils literally from all over the world competing, with special mention going to Hanny Wong running at her local track in Hong Kong. The Dean Close community certainly presented itself pretty well, and it's brilliant to see how supportive runners and riders were of each other and each other's efforts, regardless of their time. So thank you very much all for that. A special mention goes to Barnaby, who competed in every running and cycling event and won 3 events in total. The winners from the various categories are on your screen. Very well done to all of those who took part. Looking at this week's challenges, photography moves on to light competition and a couple of examples of what you might be inspired to produce this week. So photography, this week's challenge is Lego building. We're looking for a hybrid land and sea animal. So have a look at the pictures, perhaps a little bit of inspiration from there, and entries to Mrs. Davis on Teams, and we'll announce the winner for that competition. This week's Bake Off challenges sees a tray bake, so it might be something savoury or something sweet, but hopefully we'll get some more people engaging with that. So looking forward to seeing your own concoctions of that, and looking forward to seeing next week entries. Mrs. Allen is planning a live acoustic night on Friday the 22nd of May. Do please contact her if you are able and willing to take part. That will be a fantastic evening, and seeing the musicians performing live on screen would be a great occasion. And to finish off this week, I'm going to leave you with the psychology department's Funny Face Friday. Enjoy.